The Prime Minister warns the Indian variant could delay England's roadmap out of lockdown. Tonight, he's announced second vaccines will now be accelerated, but we're likely to face hard choices ahead.
I have to level with you that this new variant could pose a serious disruption to our progress and could make it more difficult to move to step 4 in June.
Also tonight, as fighting worsens, is Israel preparing for a ground assault on Gaza. We'll have the latest from the border. The tale of two retailers as high street stalwart Debenhams shuts up shop for good. Amazon expands its empire with 10,000 new jobs. And some good news for holidaymakers tonight. Portugal lifts its ban to allow Britons to fly in from Monday.
This is the ITV Evening News with Kylie, Pentelow.
Good evening. There was a sobering warning from the Prime Minister today that the new Indian variant could make it more difficult to move England out of lockdown in June. Scientists have confirmed the strain is more transmissible than even the Kent variant. It's not yet clear how much, though, more transmissible it is. If it's significant, then Boris Johnson said there could be hard choices ahead. To tackle the new variant, the second dose of vaccine for the over 50s is being accelerated. But although cases are rising again, Mr Johnson said it won't stop restrictions easing on Monday. Here's our health editor, Emily Morgan, on the new COVID concerns.
By the look of the queues, residents in Sefton are taking the Indian variant seriously. They're waiting to be tested, one of the tools that's been deployed here to try to get infection rates under control.
A bit worried, really, now this new virus is hitting the town. I think we all have a civic duty to come and get tested.
As an area we were very, very low. Then all of a sudden there was a scare at the local swimming baths, and before you know that, 2 schools were closed.
So concerned by the rapid spread of the variant, the Prime Minister conceded the end of lockdown may have to be pushed back.
I have to level with you that this new variant could pose a serious disruption to our progress and could make it more difficult to move to step 4 in June.
Last week, just 520 cases of the Indian variant had been reported. Since then, they've more than doubled to over 1,300. This graph shows why the speed of its spread is causing scientists to worry. Unlike any other variant, it's taken less than 50 days for more than 1,000 cases to be identified. Although there's no evidence it causes more severe illness or evades vaccines, anyone over 50 or at risk will now get their second dose sooner.
For people who are really quite vulnerable to the disease, that extra bit of protection that the second dose gives you from 85 to 95% is important, because that extra level of protection will reduce the number of people ending up in hospital and sadly dying of the disease.
Just days before restrictions ease further on Monday, questions then about how safe it is to visit family in hotspots.
Do you say that they should still go, and should they stay the night?
Given the caution that I think we have to exercise with this new variant, the risk of extra transmissibility, I would urge people just to think twice about that.
There's every chance easing of restrictions will now lead to a rise in cases, with now obvious implications for the end of the roadmap.
Emily, we're in for a crucial few weeks, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It is crucial. The Chief Medical Officer said today, he made it really clear that they're going to be looking very, very carefully at how transmissible this Indian variant really is. We know now it does spread quicker than the Kent variant, but how much quicker, that is the critical question. And interestingly, in that press conference, they were both talking about the onus being on us now. So things are going to open up on Monday. We must exercise our own judgment in thinking about what we do, whether we do go and visit family and friends in these hotspots. So I think, crucially, yes, the summer does look uncertain now. We were expecting music festivals, clubs to open, sporting events. That is all now in question. And what happens in the next 5 weeks will really determine whether those things can go ahead.
Emily, thank you very much. Nicola Sturgeon announced today that Glasgow will join Moray in remaining under the current tighter Level 3 rules in Scotland. From Monday, restrictions will ease in the rest of mainland Scotland, but travel in or out of Glasgow and Moray has been banned. The decision will be reviewed next week. Meanwhile, indoor pubs, restaurants and cinemas are among venues preparing to reopen in Wales from Monday. But First Minister Mark Drakeford said international travel was best avoided because of concerns over the Indian variant. Israeli troops are massing on the border with Gaza tonight as a ground assault looks increasingly likely. Hamas have continued to fire rockets on Israel as their territory is attacked by Israeli jets. Caught in the middle are increasing numbers of women and children, with dozens killed so far. From the border, our senior international correspondent John Irvine reports.
As the Israeli army's Golani brigade prepared for a possible invasion of Gaza today, Hamas continued to provoke one. So far, the Israelis have been unable to put a stop to rocket fire from Gaza through air power and artillery alone. This morning, in the largest air assault so far, 160 jets attacked Hamas targets in Gaza. They were trying to destroy a huge tunnel network they call the Metro. But among those killed today were a family of 6, their funeral taking place this afternoon. According to Gazan health officials, the death toll is now more than 120, roughly half of them women and children. Hospitals in Gaza are overstretched. At one, this man found a son he feared dead. What a terrifying week for the people of Gaza. Hamas started it, the Israelis are hell-bent on finishing it. Trapped civilians are just trying to survive the in-between. This is the 4th war that Israel has fought with Hamas since Hamas took control of Gaza back in 2007, and they all tend to follow the same depressingly familiar pattern, with the only variables being duration, levels of destruction, and numbers of dead. There's been more civil strife inside Israel's mixed communities. The country's equivalent of MI5, Shin Bet, is now helping the police identify vigilantes and says it won't tolerate ethnic violence by Arabs or Jews. Tomorrow is another incendiary date in the Palestinian diary. They mark the Nakba, or the catastrophe that was for them the establishment of the State of Israel. 73 years later, and the tragedy unfolding right now may be a catastrophe for everybody here. John Irvine, ITV News in Tel Aviv.
There are fears for the future of thousands of UK steel jobs after the Serious Fraud Office launched an investigation into the owner of Liberty Steel. Sanjeev Gupta is being investigated over suspected fraud and money laundering. Well, the Fraud Office is also looking at its links with Greensill Capital. Our political correspondent Libby Vina is outside the company's base in central London this evening. Libby, what could the impact of this be?
Well, this is undoubtedly a serious blow for Sanjeev Gupta, the man once hailed as the saviour of steel in this country. Now, his spokesman said a short time ago that he would cooperate fully with the investigation. But while the company is famous for saving struggling steel plants around Britain, he himself is struggling now to find new finance for his company following the collapse of Greensill Capital. Unless he finds new backers, it's thought that up to 3,000 jobs in Liberty Steel could be at risk and 2,000 other jobs around Britain. Now, Greensill Capital, who was, as I said, his main backer, we heard a lot more about them yesterday from the former Prime Minister David Cameron, who was speaking to MPs about his lobbying activities. He said that the two companies were symbiotically linked, and I think that will worry people who depend for their livelihoods on Mr. Gupta's empire. The government says it can't comment on the ongoing investigation, but it says it is monitoring developments closely.
Libby Vina, thank you. Edwin Poots has been elected as the new leader of the Democratic Unionist Party. The Stormont Agricultural Minister won with a promise to reform the party and reinvigorate unionism. The politician has a long history with the party. His father, Charlie, was one of its founding members. The partner of an Iraq war veteran who died days after being discharged from mental health treatment says he would still be alive if he'd received better help. Rifleman Lance Shingler had post-traumatic stress disorder and died last year after an overdose of prescription drugs. Today, a coroner said the father of two hadn't meant to take his own life. His bereaved partner, Hayley Goff, welcomed the verdict, but said he wasn't given enough support. She told Paul Davis about his final battle.
Nothing can bring Hayley Goff's partner Lance back, but an inquest conclusion that he hadn't set out to take his own life and should have received better care is still a significant victory.
I think it's better for my children, most importantly. I think they need to know that how poorly Daddy was, and I think the narrative verdict kind of reflects that.
The inquest decided Rifleman Lance Shingler, a veteran of the war in Iraq, died after impulsively taking an overdose of tablets while intoxicated. Hayley says a man who attended the funerals of 9 comrades had come home from Iraq mentally scarred.
He had a massive survivor guilt for people that he couldn't save, and he felt like he should have been killed, and he always used to say, I shouldn't be alive right now. People have died and I shouldn't be here.
He was diagnosed as suffering from PTSD, but his treatment after leaving the military has been criticised in the inquest and by his family.
Lance was told quite a few times, you're too complex to be helped. That to me is not good enough.
At an inquest held in the offices of Aston Villa Football Club, considered more COVID secure than traditional venues, a police officer who dealt with Lance Shingler said she was surprised he wasn't receiving more appropriate treatment. An official from the charity Combat Stress said they'd tried to help the Iraq veteran, but a residential course he'd been due to attend was cancelled because of cuts in their funding. Birmingham and Solihull NHS Trust admitted discharging the veteran from a home care programme 3 days before his death was a mistake. It's a list of failures Hayley will explain to children Riley and Ellie J when they're old enough to understand.
I am going to be very honest and say your dad did ask for help. I'm not going to sit and hide anything from my children, and I'm going to be very honest to say this government did fail their dad.
Today marked the end of a 15-month personal battle to highlight those failings. Paul Davis, ITV News, Birmingham.
And still to come on the ITV Evening News, the end of decades of history as the final Debenhams stores prepare to close. And that's one of its 9 lives gone, the cat that escaped a fire. We'll have those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Now, the few remaining Debenhams stores are preparing to close their doors for the final time tomorrow. And when they do, it will end 242 years of history. Only its brand and name will live on, and only online. As our consumer editor Chris Choi reports, thousands of jobs are gone and gaps in our high street grow.
Across the country, shutters are coming down on more than 2 centuries of retail history. Nationally, 12,000 Debenhams store workers have lost their jobs. Today, the last member of staff in Southend was locking up and leaving.
I just handed over the key for the final time. That's my last shift for Debenhams now after 19 years.
It just doesn't really seem real that Debenhams has gone, does it? No.
Samantha Allen worked here for 24 years, Lisa Zamara for 15.
Looking at it now, like it's empty, and it is really sad and it is really emotional thinking about it as well.
It's been totally heartbreaking. It's really sad to see the high street in decline.
When Debenhams began winding down, it had 142 department stores. The final 28 stop trading tomorrow. Analysis for ITV News shows of those closed since last year, 38% remain empty. And with limited demand for high street spaces, even 4 years after the collapse of BHS, 26% of its former stores were unoccupied.
I think with every store closure, it creates fewer and fewer reasons for consumers to potentially then visit that high street. And clearly that then creates a challenge for the retailers that remain.
Back in 1981, its sales drew crowds, but Debenhams was doomed as online competition kicked in, compounded by pandemic. Margaret Butler, who worked at the Bolton store more than 30 years, summed it all up today.
It's an end of an era. We're losing high street stores. There's very, very little left now, and it's so very, very sad.
There are many fond memories, but few ideas on how to bring back business and shoppers to Britain's once thriving high streets. Chris Choi, ITV News.
Well, as Debenhams closes down, Amazon has announced thousands of new jobs. They're being created at the company's distribution centres across the UK. Our business editor Joel Hills is in Newcastle this evening. Joel, this is a tale of retail winners and losers.
It is, and these are the last days of Debenhams. The department store behind me will close for good tomorrow. But as jobs are being lost here in the city centre of Newcastle, a few miles out in Gateshead, they are being created. Amazon is building yet another distribution centre, a giant warehouse as it tries to keep up with the demand for online shopping. The company's creating 10,000 new jobs this year. Amazon's business, of course, was on fire before coronavirus, but in lockdown, its sales have surged yet further. Global data calculates that £4 in every £10 that is spent online currently is spent on Amazon's website, an extraordinary number. But the company insists it cannot be blamed for the upheaval on the high street.
The pandemic has been very difficult for so many businesses of all different sizes. A lot of these challenges were happening kind of a long time ago, and I think it will continue.
And what would you say to people who feel that Amazon has killed the high street?
I would say that a lot of the trends that we've seen have happened over a long period of time. The pandemic in particular has been very difficult.
High street retailers are not only trying to keep up with the accelerated change in shopping habits, they also complain the tax system hands Amazon a massive advantage. As a global retailer, Amazon can use corporation tax rules to keep its bills low. It pays much less in business rates than all these retailers that have lots and lots of high street shops. The government is looking at the tax system. Reform is promised, but any change that does come will be too late, of course, for Debenhams.
Joel, thank you very much. BBC journalist Martin Bashir has left the broadcaster due to ongoing health issues. Bashir, who was the BBC News religion editor, has been seriously unwell with coronavirus-related complications. His departure comes amid allegations he faked documents to secure his 1995 interview with Princess Diana. Now, despite concerns about the spread of the Indian coronavirus variant, foreign holidays from England will be allowed from Monday. And as ITV News reported last night, Portugal has officially confirmed it will accept British travellers. Well, our Europe editor James Mates is in the Algarve for us this evening. James, a sense of relief there, I expect.
Yeah, very much so. Despite some reports elsewhere, they will be welcoming British travellers with a big welcome at the airport, apparently, on Monday for the 5,500 expected to arrive that day. Now, I've just come off the phone with the country's tourism minister. She said, listen, this decision will be reviewed every 2 weeks, so don't necessarily assume that it's going to last for the whole of the summer. She said that fans coming for the Champions League final in 2 weeks' time, under current plans, they must still come in a bubble and go home afterwards on charter flights, but that may change. But she warns not to anticipate tacking a holiday onto that football match. And the other point she made is when I asked why Portugal had gone against the EU continued ban on tourism from the UK, she said, listen, that ban is going to be reviewed next Wednesday. We anticipate that's going to be lifted, so we're only really jumping the gun by 48 hours. So that's a big hint for more good news next week that tourism across the EU will be allowed from Britain although, of course, UK quarantine rules still remain the same.
OK, James, thank you very much. Finally, they say a cat always lands on its feet, and for one lucky feline in Chicago, it did just that. Take a look at this. The cat managed to escape a fire in a 5th floor flat by flinging itself out of the window. As you can see here, filmed by the Chicago Fire Department, the cat landed on the ground safely, tested its paws with a little jump, and then ran away unharmed. It must have used up one of its 9 lives there. And that's all for now. Tom will be here at the later time of 10:20. Bye-bye.